Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I'm your host, Mark Pellegrino, and also the host of, and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and vice chair of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz. Of course, the host of his own great show, The Rational Egoist, which all of you should be listening to. You should be liking it, subscribing to it, sharing it across all your social media platforms, just as you are doing with this show, because we need rational egoism to take over cultural dominance from altruism. Michael, any new news from your show that people would be interested in seeing?
I'm going through right now over here the comments, but I still got the interview with Andy Bernstein up in a couple days, maybe tomorrow. I'm hoping an interview with the objectivist cardiologist and best-selling author Christina Laporte will be out, and that was a great interview. Got some stuff coming up next week. I interviewed a local popular talk show host, Tom Shattuck. That'll be coming next week. And I got an interview tomorrow with a guy about leadership. You know, this always gets me, these damn time zones. So I was scheduled yesterday to interview this guy at 2:30. So at 2:30, I come in, I set up the thing, and I'm like, Jesus, what's this guy doing? He's late. I said, well, if he's more than 5 minutes late, I'm out. I've got too much to do because I had another interview coming up at 4. I go and look, and then at the bottom, I see in his note, all times are PST. I said, son of a bitch. So that means it would have been 5:30, but he was gracious enough to reschedule for tomorrow. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I had some of those same scheduling issues with that interview I did with the Australian folks.
Oh, that was sick with that.
That was
I
crazy.
had to get up at 1:30 in the morning for that.
Yeah, so I missed the first one. We got the second one right, but when there's 17 hours difference, it's like whole day. You're passing the day.
Yeah. My producer for the Rational Egoist is in Australia, so I don't know. Like when I'm texting her the information, is it good morning? Who the hell knows? It's like good next week.
Yeah, good tomorrow. I guess it is.
People shouldn't live there if it's going to cause this kind of aggravation for me.
Well, they probably shouldn't live there because Australia seems to be doing some pretty bad things to speech, just like the UK is, and they also seem to have a massive undercurrent of anti-Semitism there, which makes an otherwise beautiful continent fairly ugly to me.
I'm more concerned about the inconvenience for me, but okay.
But don't you think politics can ruin a place? I mean, look at California, the most beautiful state in the union. We should be attracting people here by the millions, and we're losing 350,000 people a year because of the
politics. But you still live there. Why?
Jiu Jitsu, baby.
Okay. So it must be worth it to you.
No, I'm taking the hits because I certainly value Jiu Jitsu more. But it's getting to the stage where it won't be feasible unless, of course, there's a sea change and Gavin Newsom gets out, tries to run for national politics, and the state legislature changes. All of this is possible with the emergence of the American Capitalist Party, I just might add.
Where can they find the American Capitalist Party for those who wish to know?
AmericanCapitalistParty.org. You can hit donate and you can become a member and be the change, folks. In fact, you sent me a tweet about James Lindsay. James Lindsay talking about how awful the woke right is in essence, and I sent him a DM about the American Capitalist Party, and we have been going back and forth all morning about it. So he's
you bury the lead, dude.
Hey,
you sent me this text. No, you send me a text and you say I DM'd James Lindsay.
Yeah,
that was it. You don't. So I'm thinking, oh well, maybe he'll get back to you. That'd be great. Now you come out and tell everyone you're going.
Look, I don't give my cards away, brother.
You just did online. It says instead of giving it to me in private. What do you mean you don't give your cards away?
Why should I give it to you in private?
Why? Then why tell me anything in private? Because then I'm prepared and I'm not surprised.
No, surprise is good. You want to be surprised.
Why don't you get him on this show? James Lindsay.
Let's get James Lindsay to be on this show because he could talk about the woke right. He did a great job at dismantling the woke left. Now he's turning his sights against the woke right.
Get him on here. Everybody put pressure on Mark Pellegrino to get James Lindsay, who's his new best friend. Get him on the show. It'll be great.
He's not my new best friend, but he was.
He's not DMing me, dude.
Well, that's because you're you. But he was, in that group with Peter Boghossian that exposed the left-wing academia, and it ended up ruining their careers in academia, of course. because the academics in these exposed courses didn't want to do any introspection, course change. They just wanted to destroy people who exposed them for what they were. But you sent me this interesting tweet where Andrew Fox talks about what's going on. Yes, shots have been fired. Allie's been sort of pressing me a little bit.
She's the smartest person there is.
She's been getting a little inappropriate with me online, I gotta say.
There's nobody smarter than Allie.
Allie, you are walking a very fine line with me. I want you to know, and I'm serious. Right. I'm not fucking.
Okay, so what is the story?
So Andrew Fox was talking about the decimation over there in Gaza, and how entire cities like Rafah are completely annihilated. And of course, these serve as wonderful PR for Hamas, because the pro-Pally people take these flattened areas and they photograph them, they put them in films, they put them to rousing music or sentimental music, and then they post these as an example of how awful Israel is. But the real story is, and Douglas Murray alluded to this in his debate with Dave Smith, by the way, the real story is, when the people are moved out of these various areas, in part by the IDF tells them, we're going to attack this area because Hamas is there. Hamas helps to move these people out of there. And then they proceed to booby trap every third house. So at first, the IDF, in an attempt to keep casualties low and, of course, structural damage to a minimum, would send IDF troops into each of these houses to clear them. Of course, this ended up in massive casualties for the IDF because these booby traps would blow up. Of course, blowing up the house in the meantime and killing IDF soldiers. So they started adjusting their process. First, they would send robots in to check, then a dog in, and then they'd send a small team of 4 in. And what ends up happening is they have to, what became easier, because they would still lose robots, they'd lose dogs, they'd still lose IDF soldiers, would be to simply blow up the house. Since they know it's booby trapped, they simply blow it up, so that they are saving IDF lives. They're saving, saving themselves on multiple fronts. And of course, now it gives the appearance that the entire place is decimated, but not because Hamas has booby trapped every other house and made it impossible for the IDF to go house to house without literally annihilating every structure there, but because the Israelis are bad people. So this comes by way of Andrew Fox, who was a British paratrooper who eventually, I think, finally retired from the military and started a think tank. He retired with the rank of major and started a think tank. And he's gone over there and analyzed the situation. And this news comes by way of him. What did you think of this? I mean, Douglas Murray's already talked about this, that there were tunnel openings in every other home, literally, that led down to the tunnel networks underneath Gaza. So that the IDF really had no choice but to start decimating structures the way they did. How do you feel about this? I mean, this terrible propaganda game on the part of the Palestinian movement, and it's actually winning hearts and minds in Canada, England, and France.
America. Here, Mark, is where I agree with you all the way, that the Israelis should not sacrifice their own soldiers or people in order to prevent the deaths of Palestinian civilians, right? I've said before, I think that when possible, civilian casualties should be avoided. But there's situations where they can't, unless you're going to hurt yourselves. And in that case, it would be a woeful act of self-sacrifice. And I absolutely do not think the Israelis should do that, or anybody that's at war. The problem is for the Israelis and it's not just the Israelis. I mean, the Israelis seem to get it overboard. Everybody piles on here in America, all sides, whether it be the left, the right. There's factions all over the place that just are Jew haters. I don't know what else to say. And I'm not equating criticism of Israel with Jew hatred, but the two do seem to overlap far more than coincidence would seem to allow. But even when, any war goes in and you see all these civilian casualties, you see kids dying, and, nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants, well, I don't know what nobody, but no decent human being wants children to die. I do not want Palestinian children getting killed. But if I'm Israel and I have this murderous, barbarous organization that wants to kill all of us, and I'm going after them, and they use these kids as shields, they do this booby trapping of the house. And by the way, if the IDF goes in on foot, the houses are going to blow up anyway because Hamas has already booby trapped them. The only difference is that with doing it this way, the IDF soldiers don't get killed. But it's a very tough argument to have because the propaganda is just overwhelming, and most people, the emotions are just strong. You see dead kids, or you see people getting shot, whatever, murdered, hungry, and it tears at people's heartstrings. And a lot of people just don't look further than that.
Yeah, unfortunately so. I think Hamas is winning the propaganda war because war is ugly, folks. It's not something that can be beamed into your living room in the afternoon and that you can easily accept. I'm sure that if we saw a minute by minute a play-by-play of World War II, or what was going on in Guadalcanal or Okinawa, or what was happening in Normandy, the stomach of the American people for war would have been depleted before the war was over, and perhaps there would have been calls for long before the enemies were defeated, because war is an ugly, hellish thing. And let's not forget, Hamas has brought it upon themselves. They refuse to surrender, and the reason they refuse to surrender is because the international community is colluding with them, not deliberately, just by virtue of the fact that their ideology aligns and their hatred.
I got an important question for you, Mark.
Yeah.
Can you back up a little bit? Just to, you see how I'm nice and distanced from my computer? The reason is because when I get the clips, they come now, and it's just your giant face. That's and Persephone told me you need to get Mark to back up, and I forgot, and I just remembered right now.
All right, is that back up enough?
I don't know, because I don't make the clips.
All right, we'll keep experimenting with the distance to the screen and see how.
But I do know that when I get these clips, I had to tell her, she ends up doing them, but now I've got these black you're like in a black rectangle type thing, but it's like your face is just huge. It occupies the whole thing.
Exactly the way I like it. My huge face occupying everything, including overpowering yours, perhaps.
What did you just say? What does that even mean?
In case you didn't,
you want your face to overpower mine? What the hell does that even mean? Persephone says you need to go a little further back.
If I go any further back, I'll be in the next room.
Dude, you're a rich and famous actor. I'm stuck in this minimal room here, and I can do it.
Stop,
Persephone, let him know. Is that good?
How's that?
Ariana says you are feisty today. Yes, he is feisty. Some might even say sassy.
Hey, so
she says it should be better. We're good now. Okay, so now you can give.
In case you didn't notice, X is a toxic atmosphere, and James Lindsay did a nice little interview with John Stossel talking about how toxic the atmosphere is. Now, we all knew it was toxic when the left had control of it, right? Because that's when cancel culture really started and really reached its pinnacle on X. You could say something before you got on a flight, and by the time you got off the flight in the next state, you'd been fired. Your entire reputation had been ruined because you made an off-color joke, or you said something that other people perceived as insensitive. And the woke left literally ran rampant over everybody. And then the culture on X became one of intimidation and fear and deep bullying. Now, everybody thought that was going to, not everybody, but people on the right thought it was going to end with Elon Musk taking over. Of course, it hasn't. It's now become a right-wing cesspool of toxicity. So now the other tribe has control, and people like James Lindsay, myself, maybe even you, Michael, are left out of the algorithms in a sense, where we fall between the cracks because we're not in any of these toxic tribes. And so a lot of our posts get sort of disappeared into the ether. And it leaves us wondering what the heck is going on. Of course, it gives the other side lots of room to make fun of us because we get ratioed. ratioed a lot because our fans are not of the same type that I guess excite the bullying and toxic algorithms on X. What do you think of this? Is X truly toxic? I think it
Oh,
is.
it's disgusting. It's gross. I hate it. I truthfully, I'm only there to promote myself. That's it. I mean, I'm going to be honest. And I don't really give a fuck. You know, people say, "Oh, you're clout chasing." Well, what the hell else am I going to be doing there? I'm there to promote myself. I'm not there for the intellectual stimulation. I can tell you that right now.
What do they say? Clout chasing?
Clout chasing, yes, yeah.
Come on.
If I want to debate somebody that's more famous than me, that's clout chasing. Of course, you know, the thing is, like, for me, I debate anybody. I've literally picked people, you know, random people off Facebook or X who say, I want to debate you. And I say, okay, come on, you know, I'll do it. I just like to debate. But the more famous folks, who, by the way, go after the people more famous than they are, but that somehow is not clout chasing. But they call it clout chasing. I call it trying to get myself out there. You know, the first time I reached out to you, I didn't know you. I said, "Hey, you want to come on my show?" Because that's what you do when you're trying to get yourself out there. But they've done that. And this whole stupid thing, this ratio thing, it reminds me of high school. Like, oh, look at you. You're getting ratioed. Ooh, look at you. I don't give a fuck. I've been shot at. You know what I mean? Like, do you really think because I get negative comments on X? Like, that's going to, well, what?
What's that? Isn't ratioing like the number of folks that see your thing is disproportionate to the number of people that like and respond to it? So it's like nobody likes your stuff, dude.
Yeah, I think it's you get more negative comments than positive comments.
Yeah.
So like more people are telling you up. Now, the trick to this is this, right? I've been blocked by Clint Russell. I've been blocked by Josie, the redheaded libertarian. I was blocked by Dave Smith, who subsequently unblocked me. But I can avoid getting ratioed if I just block everybody that disagrees with me.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'm, which is in essence what they do. And of course, if I go and comment or post about Dave Smith, who has 500,000 followers, I think maybe he has more, and I disagree with him and his followers get in, of course I'm going to get ratioed because they already agree with him off the bat. If we were to go to Ocon and have a conversation, I would then ratio Dave Smith, but that's not what's going on. But they really believe that this is like the important thing. They will throw it out there. Dude, you just got so ratioed. You don't see how this is going for you? And it's like, oh my God.
You have to be an idiot not to understand how meaningless that is.
Yes, you do.
But guys like Dave Smith, who I think they do try to promote themselves by, they are, what did you call it? What is it called again?
Dickheads?
No, they're dickheads. But you said when you go after somebody who is more popular than you and you ask them to
clout chasing.
Clout chasing. That's right. I think Dave Smith genuinely is clout chasing. I think he's all about the numbers that he has, the number of people that agree. He's a total second-hander.
Right. I think how to put it. I think that clout chasing in the sense of wanting to get your stuff out there is okay. I just don't think that should be paramount. And I think that that's what you're saying. It shouldn't come at the expense of integrity. Like I've had people tell me, oh, you should just, don't worry about your integrity right now while you're doing the show. You have to build up an audience first and then you can worry about integrity. And my response is, well, first of all, I'm not selling myself out, but also what kind of audience am I going to build if I do that? And then when I try to revert, they're all just going to leave anyway. Because if people
say that, sell your soul just so you can get popular, and then somehow you're going to magically find it again, and those people who like you for the fact that you sold your soul are going to stick around.
Let me tell you, I would much rather just be who I am, hang around with Jim Valiant and Mark, make fun of them for hours on end, and I'm good with that. I don't need all these other folks.
Agreed. So a while back, something was written in the New York Times Magazine called the 1619 Project that made a massive stir and garnered Nicole Hannah-Jones, the author of the piece, a Pulitzer Prize. It turns out, though, that multiple renowned historians came out against the piece. And Michael, you're doing a bad thing when the World Socialist Organization actually publishes a piece against the 1619 Project, literally refuting every word of it, you know that an organization that is interested in bringing down the United States, sowing chaos, and wanting to replace a Republican government with socialism, when they come out against you and they completely decimate your book, you know, or your article, you know that it's bad. Well, you sent me a little piece, I guess about a new book came out by Philip Magnus. Have you read this thing?
I've not read his book. I do know him. I've interviewed him a few times on my show.
Yeah, so Philip Magnus wrote a book, The 1619 Project Myth. Now, I've read about 3 or 4 books on the 1619 Project, and this project particularly makes me upset.
I'm going to reach out to him and get him on my show to talk about this.
That would be great, because this stuff, despite the fact that it was disproven by multiple world-renowned historians, despite the fact that there have been reams and reams of evidence showing how false the premises were of the article, and now you see how they're agitating for political unrest, they're agitating for reparations. It's become a means of justifying some radical political action on the left. Despite all of this, it's still instituted as curriculum in some city schools, unfortunately. So there's going to be a lot of kids who are influenced by this and are going to think, well, the actual starting date of the United States should be when slavery came in to America, which even that is a false narrative. Do you know anything, any of the details respecting the ship that came into the harbor in 1619 that contained those slaves?
Well, I don't know what you mean. I don't know.
Okay, so what it was a captured Spanish ship, basically, that was a slave ship, unbeknownst to the privateers who captured it. They brought it into port, and all of those people on board didn't become slaves because there was no active slavery in the colonies at the time. There were no slave laws at the time. It was just a group of people trying to survive. It was 1619, for crying out loud. So they had a primitive form of a colonial government. And all of those people became indentured servants. Now, if you think about it, about 85% of the population of colonial America were indentured servants. Now, we may not like indentured servants or indentured servitude today, but back then in the 17th and 18th centuries, it was the way in which poor people financed their trip to the New World. They basically signed a contract with somebody to be an indentured servant for a certain number of years, and when their term of service was up, they were free. They were let go. This is precisely what happened to every single one of those people. They were like 85% of the population, a colonial population, that then went free because there was no slavery. There was no active slavery in the colonies at the time. And a couple of them even became wealthy merchants. One might have even become a slave merchant himself at some point later on down the line, but they were not slaves. And so it is inappropriate to claim that our history of slavery dates back to 1619. It in fact doesn't. Those people became indentured servants and became freemen after their term of indentured servitude was over, like most other indentured servants. That's one of the things that particularly bugs me about that, is that little detail, which I think says a lot, is never mentioned in the 1619 piece. So we are getting a piece of false history, and Magnus's book, I think, is a way of overcoming this false history. We're getting a lot of this. We're getting a lot of this in the war in Gaza, the Middle East conflict, Israeli history. A lot of stuff out there on social media is flat out bullshit, but it is quoted as truth. And then it just makes its trip around, it's recycled around social media so often that it becomes the truth for some people. I'm glad this book exists because we can combat this false history. What say you?
I think I'm going to reach out to Philip Magnus and get him to come on my show and talk about this. I talked to him briefly about it before, but not in depth enough. I want to actually read his book, and I want to read the 1619 Project. It's just I have a lot going on here that is problematic. I got every time I want to read something else comes up to read.
By the way, they haven't pulled her Pulitzer Prize, even though it's been, even though everything she wrote has been disproven. They haven't pulled her Pulitzer Prize.
Okay, so this reminds me of when you were talking about child labor and how the child labor, when it has existed or even exists today in growing economies, it's bad and it's unfortunate, but it's also often better than the alternative was, than what came before that.
Correct.
And slavery has always existed. What hasn't always existed are rights-based countries. Right. So, yes, the founding fathers, many of them were hypocritical. They were chauvinist. Women didn't get the right to vote. Some were slave owners. Many were slave owners. But what they produced was so much better than anything that ever came before it, and ultimately produced the types of societies that are multicultural, that are accepting, that are tolerant, that allow for diversity of opinion, that ultimately led to the demise of slavery, of chauvinism, that sort of thing. And yet they're judged by the very sort of standards that they gave rise to, that wouldn't exist had it not been for them. So
yeah, I find it ironic that many people on the left are judging people in the 18th century by standards that century actually made accessible.
Yes. Yeah.
You don't like Thomas Jefferson. You think he's a psychopath. You think he's a pedophile, and yet you're judging him based on standards he actually wrote, and that you're now stealing to judge him by.
Yeah, there's a question that says child labor is always a part of country's evolution. I don't know if it's always a part, but I do know that when you're living at a subsistence agricultural level, that these kids were working on their farms. They weren't going to school back then. They're certainly, not off watching Pokemon or what's the Barney, or what are the things they have now, Paw Patrol, right? So they were put to work, because the living of the family depended on it. And until you get to the stage where enough capital is saved and enough investment takes place, where quality of life goes way up, then the kids can go off and do other things. Then we all have more downtime. Like you hear people talk about frequently, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, we're so crunched for time. We have more, and I do it too. Obviously, I'm the biggest complainer about this. Plus, I'm framing Gelder, but or is it Gelder? Yeah, Gelder. Yeah, but ultimately, we have so much free time on our hands nowadays. Where in the past, you had to just work to maintain yourself.
You worked from sun up till sundown, and you basically went to bed when the sun went down, and that was your life. And it was harder, much harder in earlier. I'd love to see some of these folks that are complaining. There was a girl complaining on social media recently about working a 40-hour week. It made it impossible for her to take a shower. She went 3 weeks without taking a shower because of working a 40-hour week. Okay. And she had to quit her job because she just didn't have any me time. How that's possible with somebody who's just working a 40-hour week. I can see if you're working 60, 70, 100 hours a week, like owners of companies do, like, small business owners do. They have to take their business work home with them. The employee is lucky. He just works his hours, goes home. The owner is sitting there and having to work continuously until the thing gets off the ground. Manu says her parents started working at 14. They weren't slaves, and they really enjoyed it. I frankly started working at 12. I did a paper route, and I mowed people's lawns. I did that of my own volition because I wanted, some spending money. I wanted to be able to buy stuff, that might.
And what do you do now?
What do I do now? I'm an actor.
I read this book called Nickel and Dime. It was recommended by Oprah, and it was this woman who went out into the workforce to try to see how hard it was. And it was so difficult. She was so mistreated, And as I read this book, I can't remember now all the contradictions I came across, all the ridiculous things, but it turned out like she wanted to live on the high end with all kinds of expensive clothes. She wanted to stay in the best hotels. So this guy, a business, he was either a graduate of business school or he was attending business school. He wanted to show that she was wrong. So he went and without any help from anybody, said, I'm going to build a life and I'll give myself, I think it was 3 months he did. What he did is he went and stayed in a shelter, right? Instead of staying in high-end motels, saved his money, and he ended up doing exactly what he said he was going to do. So she was just full of it. Larry Green says Cornelius Vanderbilt quit school at 11 and went to work for his father. By the time he was 16, he started his own ferry service. Nice. And ultimately, he would give rise to Anderson Cooper.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? You didn't know Anderson Cooper is related to Cornelius Vanderbilt?
Why isn't he more of a capitalist then? That's what I want.
I don't know. His mother is Gloria Vanderbilt.
Wow. Okay. Well, what I love about that is he started his own ferry service, but it's particularly amazing about that story to me is that he also beat a monopoly. He beat the Fulton monopoly in the ferry service, and just by offering services for free, eventually Fulton went under. That was a subsidized ferry service, I think, across the Hudson River, and he beat them and became the premier guy. Just by offering better services, folks. That's the way capitalism works. That is the way capitalism works, which is why we endorse it. It is an upward trajectory, folks. But it requires experimentation. It requires innovation. It requires freedom. And that's why we promote all of those things here on the Capitalist Corner. So speaking of innovation or lack thereof, there's a Minnesota town that denied a family permission to build affordable housing unit on their property. Now, this town is apparently experiencing a housing shortage, and in response to this, the city took steps to deal with it by passing a local ordinance 21-2489 to address the issue by allowing property owners to build residential districts to construct an accessory dwelling unit, what they call an ADU. So it's a self-contained mini home, basically, on their own properties. And it was designated to help relieve the housing shortage there in Blaine. And this couple attempted to do that. They abided by all of the rules in this city ordinance, built a dwelling, and were prepared to lease this out. But they were now being sued by the people in the city that didn't want this in their backyard. Do you want to talk about this a little bit? Because this seems just insane.
It's also an issue that is now embraced by both folks on the left and right. It's beyond now you have a right to do with your own property. Now you have a right to a neighborhood that's going to reflect, how you want the character of the neighborhood to be. I think it's absolutely absurd. I do real estate title searches for a living. And so I have to go and I find all the permits. And the things that people have to get permits for are so stupid. It's like the other day, the fire marshal came over here because Subby's dad was burning cardboard, I think, in the fire pit in the backyard. And they came and said, oh, no, you can only burn wood in the fire pit. You cannot burn cardboard. Like, I cannot imagine what fucking legislator out there thinks that it's his business whether someone burns cardboard on their property or not. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. But then they don't want you building duplexes because they're afraid of the type of people that are going to come into the neighborhood, whatever. Brian Kaplan, the great anarchist economist, wrote a really good book called Build, Baby, Build as the solution for everyone talks about the housing shortage. And he was just talking about, you could build vertical buildings, but it's all this stupid local zoning. And, I think I mentioned this before. There was a state, was she a senator? I think she was, I'm not sure if she was a senator or just a member of the Connecticut House. And she ran this liberty group in the Charter Oak School for Constitutionalism or something, where they were really promoting liberty. And at the same time, she was promoting local zoning, saying that these places have a right. It's their property right to local zoning. And I offered her in 3 of her pals to come on my show, and they originally agreed until she found out that we were going to debate, and then I never heard from her again. I think she thought she was going to come on and I was going to promote her idea. She first said, well, can I come on with my three, members of my group? They're all very passionate about this issue. I said, yeah, I don't care. I'm thinking you're all so wrong on this. You could bring your whole committee. It wouldn't matter to me. But this is a cancer. The idea, it's like Nathaniel Brandon talked about, the divine right of stagnation. They get a neighborhood and they think this is the way the neighborhood is now supposed to be. I don't ever want it to change. Screw everybody else. Screw property owners. This is what we want. Ariana says that zoning ordinances have been the bane of her existence this past week.
Well, I'd like to know why in respect. So yes, and we're experiencing this issue in California too with the rebuilding of the Palisades. They're trying to cut through the red tape over there, but running into the same not in my backyard issue where developers want to build duplexes on these properties, and because of zoning issues are not being permitted to do that, which is putting a crimp in building back and allowing more people to have housing. Of course, Governor Newsom is on board with these restrictive regulations as usual. So we're experiencing the same thing here in the Palisades. I mean, how long has it been since the Palisades fire? Do you remember?
Oh, they were having a big fire when I went to San Diego, so that would have been February. So
March, April, May, June, July.
Yeah, 6 months. 6 months, Mark.
I wonder how much.
Did you really have to count the months?
On my fingers. Yes, I did. I wonder how much infrastructure has been built. I wonder how many homes have been put up in the past 6 months in the Palisades. We should ask Grok that, because I doubt there's been even a handful. And
I'm going to ask Grok right now. I love Grok.
I do too, but people have very little sympathy for the folks in the Palisades, of course, because they are wealthy and don't care that their houses and lives burn to the ground. I do, however, and I think they should be allowed to build back as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, local ordinances make that impossible. Now, you sent a Psychology Today article to me that I thought was very, very good. Trauma is not an alibi, balancing empathy and accountability. Now, this article particularly hit home with me because, Michael, one day I decided to do a little thing for the supernatural fandom, and I created this shirt that was something about that said something like reason and this world and happiness. To all these things I say yes. And I immediately got pilloried by that toxic part of the fandom that likes to sit in mental illness and thinks that entitles them to be cruel and awful to other human beings, and that they entitles them to other people to be subsidized by other people, and they hate me because I don't think they're entitled to that thing. And their basic comment was that was tone deaf. Mark had an aspirational T-shirt that encouraged us to lift up life and not just settle for the fact that we're not well mentally, but to actually aspire to something more in our lives. And for that, instead of using that as a gut check, we're going to just attack him and try to cancel him on social media. So this really did affect me because, people can use trauma, early childhood trauma, particularly as an excuse for cruelty, as an excuse for acting out and for being unconscious in the way that they treat other people. I don't think that's an excuse at all, of course, because I think you have free will. And as hard as it is to overcome that early trauma, because it almost feels intuitive, it's in your bones because it happened at such a young age. It may be your go-to, the reflexive response to something. You can still overcome it with a lot of work. So where do you think that balance exists in understanding that somebody's acting out of trauma, but at the same time having enough boundaries within your own life to set them straight, or to, back off and say, look, I can't deal with this. I don't have the equipment to deal with this, and I don't want to. What do you think about this?
I think that the key is recognizing the difference between a reason and an excuse. Because I can understand the reason why a person does something. that doesn't excuse the person doing it. And as far as using trauma as an excuse for cruelty, I spent, I can't say 21 years because I wasn't doing it as an infant, but starting at, 14 till I was in my early 20s, I used, my own trauma as an excuse for cruelty. And I would just tell people, you don't know me, you don't know what I've been through. Basically it's a license to just hurt people, steal from people. But I finally learned that I could tell you, and it gets to be very difficult for me in particular, because people will say to me, well, why did you commit crime? Right now. So I'll give them the reasons, but then it comes off as I'm making the excuse, and I'm not, because I could have chosen otherwise, but the reasons motivating my behavior are still the same. It doesn't excuse my conduct. A lot of people suffer trauma in life. A lot of people suffer a lot worse than I did and don't end up criminals. It's a matter of choice. And it's not like I'm saying it's so easy that, you've been through this horrible thing, just say, you know what, brush it off and move on. It takes a hell of a lot of work. But nevertheless, it's our responsibility as individuals to put in that work and not to use, because we're hurt, to, as an excuse to go on and hurt other people. It's up to us to make better lives for ourselves and to treat other people with respect. So I think that's really where it lies, Mark. And I've taught this principle, in numerous groups in prison, where the actual programs were teaching the excuse mentality, the victim mentality. And I said, look, you have to differentiate between the reason and the excuse. Yes, this guy grew up in a poor neighborhood. His mother was a crackhead, a prostitute. Violence was rampant. That's horrible. I understand why he ended up living a life of crime. I get it, but that doesn't excuse him for doing so. And that is really, I think, where it lies, in understanding that.
Yeah, Manu says, I think people do this because they want others to suffer as they are, and they use it as a mask, and improving is harder than acting like this. So true, Michael. Improvement is really, really, really hard. I mean, real introspection is hard. Real self-improvement is hard, because you have to check these baser instincts, because they're so reflexive. They feel like instincts, and it's your default way of behaving in the world. And so you have to really, really, really get a hold of it. That's where philosophy has been very valuable for me, to kick me off of that, to get me more introspective, and to help me deal with default ways of dealing with every situation.
One might call it the intersection between philosophy and psychology.
One might call it that. And one might also say that there is going to be a show starting with respect to the intersection of philosophy and psychology that I think will be a help for all of us.
Mark, have you ever seen the movie Tombstone?
Yes.
There's a great part in the movie that really exemplifies what Manu was talking about. When Wyatt Earp is getting ready to have his fight with Johnny Ringo, and he asks Doc Holliday, what makes a man like Ringo tick? And Doc says a man like Ringo has a great big hole in him, and he can never hurt enough, kill enough, or inflict enough pain to fill that hole. And so Doc said, Wyatt says, well, what is he after? And Doc says, revenge. And Wyatt says, for what? And Doc says, for being born. And I do think that captures a lot of the vicious, violent people that are out there, including myself at a point in my life. But what doesn't get addressed in the clip, and of course it wouldn't because it's a movie and there was no reason to, is the people that are feeling that way, the onus is on them to change their lives, to make their lives better. It doesn't mean that we can't help them. It doesn't mean that, help won't facilitate bringing them up out of that. But ultimately, it's the person's responsibility to make the choice to change, to make the choice to take whatever help's out there and to get better.
Amen to that. So we should post that article. Did I already say that?
I don't know, but you're always giving me new assignments. Meanwhile, you haven't gotten James Lindsay on the show. You didn't even tell him that to come. You didn't tell me that you were DMing back and forth, so I don't know if I should be taking orders, but I'll do it.
Oh, you're jelly.
I am.
Okay. So you sent me something from the Mises Institute that I thought was interesting. I don't know if we should get too into the weeds of it, but the title of it was Anarcho-Capitalism: The 9 Most Important Objections. Do you want to talk about this a little bit? Because
yes, can you read the 9 objections? Don't read the whole, the entire each one. Just tell me what they are, because there were two missing that I found very relevant. You can't find it, you said?
I sort of remembered this too. Okay, I think I have them here. So, number 1, private defense agencies will not be able or willing to collaborate with each other.
Okay, that's the first one.
Just seems self-evidently true. Number 2, agencies will abuse power over individuals. This seems also true. It seems like there would be a potential for cartelization and, power. Agencies will form a cartel that will inflate prices and lower the quality of services and could potentially transform into a state. I think they are states anyway, but here, so much for that. Number 4, agency or agencies may gain a monopoly in a given area and transform into a state. Of course, that seems rather self-evident too. Number 5, law in anarcho-capitalism will not be libertarian. Do you want to elaborate?
No, that actually is a great point that David Friedman made. No, because I want you to read them, because there's 2 that the author doesn't list that I think are the most vital.
6, an anarcho-capitalist society will not be able to finance military defense and will therefore be vulnerable to conquest by neighboring states. This is, of course, also self-evident to me. Number 7, an anarcho-capitalist society would struggle to fund essential public goods, although this I don't think is the responsibility of the government. The essentials meaning infrastructure is what they talked about. So I'm not in agreement necessarily with that. Number 8, power in the hands of the richest, a difficult situation for the poor, seemingly so, since this is economically focused as opposed to focused on individual rights. And number 9, anarcho-capitalism presupposes the existence of a free market and effective legal system. So it presupposes the existence of monopoly force anyway, but go ahead.
Okay, so the best one that they listed is the military spending thing, because Vincent Galloso and Peter Leeson actually did studies on, I believe they were in the 18th century, anarchist communities that actually thrived, which that part of it actually would kind of go against most of my arguments, because these places actually thrive. Now, whether they would actually fall under the rubric of anarcho-capitalism is very much arguable, and I don't think they would. But what ended up happening was, because there was no state, they just got conquered. So what Galloso and Leeson ultimately showed through their research is that these places have 2 options. Either they get conquered by another state, or they form their own to defend themselves. So it's what they call an unstable equilibrium. So that one objection I thought was good. The 2 objections that they don't name, which I think are the most vital, is 1, that there would be no objective law. There'd be no governing law over a given geographic area. So you could have multiple defense agencies in one geographic area, so people simply don't know what they're doing, whether it's illegal or not. And there's some very contentious issues that aren't just solved by an appeal to individual rights. Just 2 I'll give you. There's a lot of, and regardless of where you fall in this issue, there's a lot of controversy and dispute over the validity of intellectual property, right? So if we live in a geographic area, and I am adamantly opposed to the idea of intellectual property, I think it's a gross rights violation. So I am going to then hire a defense agency that's going to not protect intellectual property and is not going to punish anybody who steals intellectual property. Now, Mark, if you believe in intellectual property, you, of course, are going to hire a defense agency that's going to protect your intellectual property, right? So now if you write a book or a song and I steal it, how do we resolve it? Your defense agency, rightfully, because in a market economy, competition is strong. They're going to look out for their customers. Your agency is going to protect you. They're going to come after me. But my agency, goddamn, better protect me because I signed an agreement that said there's no such thing as intellectual property. And this is all in the same area. Similarly, you may have an issue with the age of consent for sex. There's no number out there in the ether that we can go grab and say, this is the appropriate number. In states right now vary from 16, 18. There might even be some differences, but those seem to be the two numbers generally. So what if I hire an agency that says 18 is the legal age of consent. Your organization says 16 is the legal age of consent. Your 19-year-old son dates my 16-year-old daughter. I report him as a rapist. I want this guy arrested. He's had sex with my underage daughter. Your agency says, hell no, my son had every right to do this. We're in the same geographic area. There's no way to know ahead of time. How do you resolve it? Walter Block actually told me in a debate that you could flip a coin.
Did he really?
Yeah. Or they say, the arbitration would solve this sort of thing. To me, there's no solving it. If I believe it's my absolute right to do something and your organization says it's not, I'm not compromising on that. The other big issue, there's no final arbiter. There's no way for this to end. So if you say I'm a crook and I say, no, I'm not, I'm never going to accept your court's verdict on me, ever. I'm just going to, no, I want to keep going. No way, no way, no way. At some point, you have to stop that, and you're going to have to use force to apprehend me. There's simply no way around it. So to me, those are the two biggest issues that the author of that article simply does not mention. There's also, numerous situations, Mark. For instance, if, I look out of my window and you and James Valiant are out in the street fist fighting, Jim's beating the crap out of you. Who do I call? Do I call my defense agency? Do I call yours? Do I call Jim's? What if you and Jim in the midst of this fight each call your own? You each call your own. I call mine. Somebody else calls theirs. 6 agencies show up. Who has jurisdiction? You have no idea.
It's a clusterfuck. It's a complete.
Yes.
And
but they did not. The author did not address those.
Surprisingly, and there's no way to avoid the clusterfuck. You know what bothered me instantly was the standard by which anarchists use to define government. They use economic standards. So that what they want is a government that promotes their preferences, just as the market, as they search the market for their own preferences. But really, government isn't about preferences; it's about protecting individual rights. I think
the other thing, Mark. You're absolutely right, and I'm going to interrupt you because I want to say this today. That Von Mises correctly points out that market prices and what's produced on the market is determined by preference, by subjective preference. The values that get produced on a market are not necessarily objective values, are not necessarily good. So as David Friedman points out, there's no guarantee with this competition among these agencies that you're going to end up with rights protection agencies. Murray Rothbard, to the contrary, notwithstanding.
I totally agree. So, Michael, we are at that time, I believe.
When you have to give the capitalist thought of the day, yes.
I believe it's you have to give the capitalist.
No freaking way, man. You take so many days off, dude, that I've got to do it or I've got to slough it off to Jim.
Speaking of days off. Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Look, look, a capitalist society is a
clusterfuck. Here's the clusterfuck.
What are you talking about?
A clusterfuck is coming where you're going to tell me how you have to take days off because of this or that or some other fancy flight you have to take somewhere.
This is true. I do have to fly out soon. So, folks, we at the American Capitalist Party want you to be free. We want you to have full moral agency. We understand that in order to do this, you need a government that is ruled by objective law, that protects property and protects your individual right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We understand this is not a market phenomenon. Force is not a market phenomenon. Rights are not a market phenomenon. And that's why we advocate for a monopoly government that is restrained by a constitution, so that it can only act in defense of individual rights and in defense of property rights. We do not advocate for anarchism, where you pick and choose from a market of competing preferences for your government. We believe that one government fits all, in the sense that we all have a right, individual rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the right to the property that we've earned, and that is the only thing that the government has to protect. So if you want a government out of your life and just protecting you from the bad guys, then you've come to the right place. That's what capitalism is. So folks, I think that's about it for today. Tomorrow we will be here at same bat time, same bat place, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern time. You have 23 hours to check your premises, and if you're leaning towards anything other than capitalism, start adjusting those premises presently. Remember to like and subscribe, and to share this across multiple platforms so we can get lots of subscribers. Subscribers means we can monetize. Monetizing means we can expand, and expand means we can reach more people, and that's what we want to do. So folks, until tomorrow, see you tomorrow.